In some ways, Spiral is both excellent and infamous. I wouldn't call the episode polarizing, but for one that contains some real excellence, there are bits and bobs here that definitely distract from the engrossing tension of Buffy's spiral towards collapse. Picking things right up from... Buffy grabs Dawn and runs. Interesting that the music being used is the same as the first episode of the season, where Buffy was the hunter and is now the hunted. It's nicely tense. Though on this run-through of the episode, I wondered to myself why Buffy didn't just run around the park bench instead of needing to parkour over it. And I almost immediately forget about Doll Dawn, because it's followed by one of my favorite badass Buffy lines ever.
Last word, sleigh run? Just one. Truck.
The gang tries to figure out their next step, and leather-pantsed Buffy proposes something pretty uncharacteristic.
See if there's
Can't fight her. She's a god, and she's coming for us. So let's just not be here when she starts knocking.
Strong is fighting.
Except, I guess, when it isn't. Ben commiserates with a strange audience over his glory problem in a conversation loaded with themes that we'll come back to. The gang is underwhelmed when Buffy arrives in an RV that looked ancient when the episode aired 23 years ago, and they are underwhelmed seeing the driver she's picked.
Buckle up, kids. Daddy's putting the hammer down.
The Sunnydale Ren Fair Knights, which I had totally forgotten about, bust out one of their brain-sucked brethren, and he reveals that the key has been found. On the road, the gang is getting grumpy in the tight, nausea-inducing quarters, but I love the scene where Dawn stops to actually acknowledge all of Buffy's efforts.
Thanks.
For what?
Pretty much everything.
Dawn shows signs of becoming part of the gang by making the classic Scooby mistake.
As long as nothing really bad happens between now and then, you'll be fine.
At least things can't get any crazier, right?
It's the ultimate jinx. What were you thinking?
Well, you guys don't know. Maybe this time it'll be different.
One of the more memorable fights in the series ensues, for better or for worse. This is a pretty notorious scene in the fandom, so I'll spend some time on it in a minute. But briefly, Spike catching the sword to save Buffy is one of those Spike moments for me. He's had a few of them this season. Buffy's tucking rollover to get back on the roof is pretty neat, and Frying Pan Anya having a moment to shine makes me happy. Somehow, Renfair Phil from Tampa got ahead of the RV and chucks a spear through the windshield, skewering Giles. The Winnebago takes a tumble, and the team takes shelter at a boarded-up gas station, a set I find really wonderful. Buffy begs for a minute, but the violence keeps coming.
Hey, just give me a minute.
Renfair Chet from next door here really needs to work on his form. Not sure why he's throwing the bow? Hacha! For some reason, only two knights manage to breach the Scooby's nigh impenetrable coffee machine barricade. Buffy makes short work of the first. The second is Renfair team supervisor Greg. He does not make a good showing of himself. Willow raises a wall. The knights bring up clerics to try and get team supervisor Greg back. The gang interrogates him. Buffy asks him to call off the violent LARPing, and he refuses. Tara and the rest of the brain sucked are triggered to action by something, putting more and more pressure on Buffy. She expresses her regret and self-doubt to Giles, who is having none of it, and stamps the "Why Can't Giles Be My Dad" square of the episode guide bingo card.
I'm so proud of you. You've come so far.
Yet again. I think Giles makes a heartwarming and significant tell here in the episode.
You're everything a watcher. Everything I could have hoped for.
That is all the things to me as well. But it also speaks to Giles' awareness that he plays two roles in his relationship with Buffy, watcher and father. At times, he pointedly swaps between his terms for her, and those moments are incredibly indicative of his own inner struggle between those two roles. Buffy tries to parlay some aid for Giles. The Knights point out that Buffy, in the process of defending herself, has killed many of them. Buffy has a code, but this is not her first rodeo. Though this is a little more direct than those previous cases, but there are headcanons to deal with it, the simplest of which is self-defense. She ends up inviting Ben to the gas station to help her, which, I understand from Buffy's perspective, given she doesn't yet understand the glory of it all. Ben's motivations, beyond cuz plot, are a little confusing.
You're the key.
Go. Before she finds you, don't ask me how she knows, because she always knows. Just go.
I won't help her find the key. I would never do that to an innocent...
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
More on that in a moment. Spike and Xander have a nice moment, with Xander helping him light a smoke.
I mentioned today how much I don't like you.
I'm gonna let it slip in.
Ren Fair Team Supervisor Greg fills Buffy in on some of Glory's backstory. Banished from her home, Dawn opens the door to let her back in, yada yada apocalypse. Supervisor Greg tells Ben that if he kills Dawn, Glory will fade from existence, leaving Ben to live his life alone. We get a scene of Ben being all sketchy around Dawn, and will he or won't he?
Want Timo?
Ben starts to turn. What did he think was going to happen? Glory kills Greg with a hubcap, then steals Dawn before proving to not be much of a Ren Fair fan. And the episode ends with Buffy having a breakdown. Insofar as season-y, plotty plot episodes go, I think most people would agree that Spiral is pretty solid. Buffy's spiraling desperation is palpable. I think the RV is a fun and unusual set for the show. I love the gas station standoff set, but I hear a few constant fandom gripes, and the biggest is over the camp-tastic RV horse sword spear fight, whatever. A scene which, according to writer Stephen DeKnight, is an homage to the 1939 John Wayne Western, Stagecoach. One of the persistent complaints I've heard is that the scene is stupid, because horses couldn't catch a gas-powered vehicle. Maybe we can make some broad, deeply unscientific assumptions about all of this.
Hey, Gramps, bloody step on it.
Step on what? I've driven tricycles with more power.
Alright, so Giles says that the Winnebago is slow. Giles, and he drove the Giles Hoopty-mobile. I think that's an early 1970s Winnebago Brave. V8 engine with about 280 horsepower when it was new in 1970. The Speedo optimistically goes up to 100 miles an hour, but that's probably absurd, especially with a full load of Scoobies. Let's be generous and say the thing could hit the 1974 national speed limit of 55 miles per hour, and that's highway driving. This thing is driving on a dirt road. Now, for reference, I'm thinking of a scene in Top Gear where the hosts tested 3 budget Italian supercars that were as old at the time as the RV is in this episode. In their test, they found that the poorly maintained cars had lost 50% of their power, sometimes more. Vehicles lose power over time, and the one in the episode is deliberately dressed to look run down. So let's say that it's lost half its power. According to several websites I found of dubious credibility, the average speed of a horse at full gallop is typically between 25 and 30 miles per hour. So even though there isn't a 1-to-1 ratio between lost horsepower and potential miles per hour, I think taking all factors into account, the Knight's catching the RV isn't something which stretches the boundaries of believability. But I think we can get to the bottom of this if we just rephrase the question a little. So, if the Scoobies leave Sunnydale in a 1970s Winnebago Brave traveling at 50 miles per hour, and the Knights of Byzantium leave their camp traveling the opposite direction at 30 miles per hour, are the Knights of Byzantium still stupid? The entire purpose of this episode seems to be tying off the loose thread that are the Knights, but is it even fair to call them a loose thread? These guys have had less development than the 3 or the Order of Taraka.
The Order of Taraka, I mean, isn't that overkill?
No, I think it's just enough kill.
There are so many things here never explained. Why are there so many of these guys? This is a huge group, and Giles has never heard of them? Is this some kind of Amway of Ren Fair self-help cults? Timmy and Bobby were bored of weekend paintball to get away from their wives. One day they get invited by Phil here to spend a weekend with this new, different kind of real cool group he's found. And then Team Supervisor Greg started taking things a little too seriously. The rest of the guys just went along with it in a Stanford prison experiment sort of way. Gregor tries to bring some gravitas for his team, but it's so late in the season here to have any success giving these guys any kind of weight in the story. I mean, Buffy's always campy, but these guys make the initiative season look like 22 episodes of Black Hawk Down. Mostly, they feel like an element to the thematic outline of the season that fell off the writer's room whiteboard until someone realized there were only a few episodes left. Another patriarchal monolith, this time intended to comment on blind faith and organized religion.
The witch's magic pales to the might of our God.
Key is the link. The link must be severed. Such is the will of God.
What is it with you religious types?
It's a shame, because I've talked in previous seasons about how Buffy borrows theological symbols without ever really commenting on theology itself. Demons, crucifixes, and angels, oh my. Glory's godhood holds such a unique place among the Buffy big bads. The Knights might have been a fuller exploration of man-made interpretations of divinity, and how you can't know what gods want.
Your sister, the Slayer, has my key. It's mine, I want it.
And how you can't know what most gods want. And how an act is either evil or good in and of itself already. God ordering something evil, like the killing of a child, can't make it good.
What kind
kind of God would demand her life for something that she has no control over?
Whether to kill Dawn in order to stop the apocalypse is an interesting moral question that grounds the trolley problem with actual emotional stakes. But the tantalizing exploration of why a divine, all-powerful being would create a universe so full of cruelty is just waved at in this episode and then ignored.
Shiny.
Then again, maybe we got enough of the LARPers this season as it is. There are a handful of important other bits to mention. Greg makes playing Glory's Achilles heel,
forced to live and eventually die, trapped within the body of a mortal.
It's squishy, floppy-haired Ben. Remember what might have happened if Xander had shot the other half of himself, or what Toph could have done to the human half of Buffy in The Replacement. One half cannot live without the other. So, if they kill Ben, Glory dies. A part of Ben seems to want to do good, which raises the question, should Ben kill himself to save the world? And given this season is about hybrids, there are metaphorical considerations as to what would have happened if Ben had killed Dawn. Question about what the other half of Dawn would lose. There are lots of little connections to Buffy and Ben being played with here, between their craving to be normal.
I just want to be normal.
I just want to have a life. I want to do something normal.
And their fear of death.
Oh yeah, I'm thrilled. Especially with the part where she gets her key back and I cease to exist.
I don't want to die.
Putting it all together, and even taking into account the Camptastic Nights, I actually really enjoy Spiral. There's some good comedy, heroic character bits, and Sarah does an effortless job of getting me invested in Buffy's struggle.
It just keeps coming. Glory, Riley, Tara. Mom.
To some degree, this season is about the ways in which life can erode youthful optimism and hope. I find it all incredibly captivating. Emotional spirals in my own life tend to occur when I am resisting things I'm terrified of. And I love the connection here that when Buffy's metaphorical mind lies bleeding and broken on the gas station counter, that is the point in which she finally collapses under the weight of the world.